Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, December 23rd, 2025. Matt Ho joins us now. Matt, a pleasure. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. Earlier today, a woman whose work we both admire, Greta Thunberg, was arrested in London for quietly sitting on a sidewalk in front of an insurance company that apparently ensures what remains of the British defense industry, holding a sign that said, "I oppose genocide." And for silently sitting there and holding that sign, she's been cast into a London jail. So people are going to be afraid to express their opinions because they're not going to all have the personal courage of this young woman.
That's the idea of it, Judge. Thank you for having me on. And I think this gets to the core of what you've been trying to do with this show for years now. Provide a platform for people to speak truth to power, even if that truth to power is something as simple as end the genocide, that the murder of innocents is wrong. And you see Greta Thunberg, just the latest in many who've been arrested in the UK under their anti-terrorism laws, which are reprehensible, draconian assaults on civil liberties and free speech. But the Brits have arrested hundreds of people in the past year, particularly those connected to the organization Palestine Action, just for holding a sign in the United Kingdom that reads, "I support Palestine Action." You can be arrested, and again, hundreds have. And many of them, I believe it's 8, are on hunger strike and have been on a hunger strike for the better part of 2 months, and they are approaching dire conditions. And I think for many people, this makes people recall the 10 Irish Republican prisoners who starved to death in the early 80s under Margaret Thatcher's rule. But this sweeping anti-terror legislation that suppresses British citizens' rights, as well as anyone in the island, on the island, to free speech. It has caught up celebrities or prominent people like Greta Thunberg. The journalist Richard Medhurst was arrested. The Northern Irish band Kneecap had a big public trial where they were put under these types of pressures because they were saying things the British government didn't like in their music. And then, of course, you've had hundreds upon hundreds of just normal, everyday, good people out there who feel that they should be able to say something as simple and as righteous and as correct as end the genocide.
Well, what happens to them? I mean, is she brought before a judge and given bail, or are they kept in jail? You're telling me these people are under a hunger strike. They're not allowed bail?
Many of them have been in jail for more than a year and a half now, without bail, not having gone to trial yet. You've had those arrested who began a campaign against British participation in the Israeli war industry and the Israeli weapons industry, particularly with Elbit Systems. You've had members of the British public in jail for their participation in civil disobedience against the British involvement directly by supporting the arms industry, by supplying weapons and support to Israel's conduct of its genocide. And so you've had men and women who've been in prison for more than a year. And then hundreds and hundreds have been arrested since the early summer of this year who have been protesting in sympathy to those who were arrested before them. And this just shows how corrupt and bankrupt the British government is, how it is ruled by elites whose allegiance are to industries such as the weapons industries, who are either in co-opted or in fear of, I guess it's one and the same, of the Zionist lobby, and who do not have 1 ounce of concern or care for the rights of their citizens, that their rhetoric about liberty, their rhetoric about freedom, their rhetoric about Western values is all superficial. And of course, this all traces back, Judge, to our friend Julian Assange and the persecution and prosecution of Julian Assange for committing journalism by the British government in conjunction with the American and Swedish governments for more than a decade.
Switching gears slightly, but it also pertains to a speech, the case of Colonel Jacques Beau, the Swiss retired military and intelligence officer, now sanctioned. He can't travel, and he can't use credit cards or get his bank money out of his bank accounts by the EU, even though he's a Swiss citizen. He's not a member of the EU, though he unfortunately lives in Brussels. Yet another example of this.
And his great crime seems to have been simply speaking the truth about the Ukraine war in particular, which is why this is so fantastical, right? This is almost like a dystopian science fiction novel. It seems as if what the European Union is most concerned about is that Colonel Baud was quoting directly Ukrainians who were critical of the war effort or who were at times offering honest appraisals or giving some, real facts to the case of the Ukraine war. That seems to be upon which the European Union has decided to sanction a Swiss citizen who was essentially just doing his job. He was a career officer in the Swiss military, and for many years now, he's been a well-regarded and very sober analyst. And so I think this has surprised a lot of people, in our community, Judge. But again, this ties into what we were just discussing about what happened in Britain, what we saw happen in the United States in the last couple of years with the persecution and prosecution of young men and women who were speaking out against genocide on American campuses, and their freedom of speech just being crushed, first by the Biden administration and now continuing by the Trump administration. But what this all gets back to is this idea of just how deathly afraid our governments are. Governments are always afraid of their people, right? I think that's a fundamental truth that we all understand. But when they're precarious, when they realize that their sovereignty, when they realize that their ability to govern is jeopardized by reality, by truth, by the public's understanding of their complicity in these great crimes against humanity, they will go to any lengths to shut that down for their own preservation. So this suppression of civil liberties, suppression of free speech, of journalism is so craven because it doesn't come from an ideological place. It comes from just a very petty and grotesque place of self-interest among the ruling class and those who govern our societies.
I'm reminded of that. I'm going to switch topics. I'm reminded of that one-liner from Thomas Jefferson. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. So the government is afraid of its own fear. If you don't mind the double use of the word there. President Trump was asked, what is he going to do with the tanker recently seized? This is the tanker with the Panama flag, according to our friend Pepe Escobar, filled with oil bought and paid for by a Chinese company, and destined to go through the Panama Canal and across the Pacific to China. Here is what the president said, cut number 9.
What are we going to do with the oil that we have?
Going to do with what?
The oil that has been seized. The United States seized 1.9 million barrels of oil on December 10th.
We're going to keep it. We're keeping it.
Where's it going? Are we going to sell it or put it in the strategic?
Maybe
oil
we'll sell it. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we'll use it in the strategic reserves. We're keeping the ships also.
Now that is piracy, theft, and an act of war. And the victim is China. Are they crazy?
They're, the absurdity, Judge, is that from what I understand, we're still chasing a third tanker, that the Coast Guard and Navy are in hot pursuit of this third tanker that refused to stop for them 2 days ago and just continued going into the Atlantic. And so you have this, we have this event occurring where the Coast Guard, American Coast Guard and Navy are chasing this tanker to try and seize it. And just as the President of the United States says, just to take its oil, to take the ship, to commit this act of piracy. There's no other explanation for it, no other word for it. The crimes that are occurring in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, in these opening phases of this war in Venezuela, of this potential coming war in Venezuela, and what could be a potential regional war, because certainly anything that occurs in Venezuela could expand beyond Venezuela's borders. But the opening phases are just such criminal. The conduct is so criminal. I mean, you can imagine historians in the future, Judge, right, writing about this. And can you imagine, a couple generations from now, our younger family members reading history books where this is detailed, how we are stealing, how we are committing acts of piracy, how we are no better than thugs and gangs looting trucks someplace. This is the same as some organized attempt to rob a truck full of cigarettes. And then claiming you're Robin Hood, essentially, that you're going to redistribute them. That's essentially what Trump's doing here. Oh, we'll put in our strategic reserve. We'll put to good use for our people, but the whole fraudulence of this, now that the argument being put forth by the American government is that this oil fuels or sustains the narcotics trade, right? As if the narcotics trade isn't a self-sustaining, industry of its own that has more than ample revenue to keep it going. As if any organized narcotics trade needs to sell oil in order to fund its drug selling efforts. I mean, the absurdity of this, how much of a farce this is. And it's, the danger is that I don't think they know what they're doing. During that press conference, Judge, at one point, maybe it was the same question, but Donald Trump is asked, how does this end? What's the end game? Do you want Maduro out? And you could see the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and the Secretary of State / National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, are on either side of Donald Trump. And most of the time when you're watching these press conferences and he's got his subordinates, or, they're standing there, they know what he's going to say, or they have a good idea. And so they're not spacing out, but, they're not engaged, with their body, with their body in the conversation. And you could see at this point, though, when Trump starts to answer the question about what's the end game here with Venezuela, you see both Hegseth and Rubio become hyper aware, really focus in on what Donald Trump is saying. You see both of their sets of eyes just glue to the president because they don't know what the end game is. I feel like you can almost guarantee that both Rubio and Hegseth in that moment at that press conference was wondering if Donald Trump was going to make an announcement that was going to change things or solidify things, or at least give them some understanding of what's next. So this is, the idea that not only are they making this up as they go along, but they're not bound by anything, but that they're willing to steal, as you were getting to, oil from China, not just carrying acts of war and piracy out against a small, weak nation like Venezuela, but doing it against the world's greatest power. So the madness here is really quite alarming.
Here's what the Wall Street Journal just reported a couple of minutes ago, actually after we went on air, Matt. The U.S. moved a large number of special operations aircraft and multiple cargo planes filled with troops and equipment into the Caribbean area this week, giving the U.S. additional options for possible military action in the region, according to U.S. officials and open source flight tracking data. I guess maybe he wants to start this war while Congress is away. Doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because even when Congress is there, Congress is away. It doesn't do anything.
Right. I mean, the failure of the Congress to pass another war powers resolution, which I think you and I both agree that wouldn't do anything, but at least there'd be some type of symbolism. There'd be some type of acknowledgement by the Congress that only about 20% of the American people support this war. 80% of the American people are saying at the forefront of this thing, we don't support it, which historically is not how it typically works. Typically, the American public is supportive of the wars. And then as the wars go badly, as the lies are exposed, as the great moral weight of these wars crushes the American government's narrative about them, the public turns against the wars. That was true for Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan.
What do you fear may very well be the unintended consequences of this thoughtless, illegal, immoral, unwise invasion of Venezuela?
Oh, Judge, the
from a military, from your military experience, do these young men, there's 20,000 young men in these ships loaded for bear, so to speak, do they want to storm the beaches?
I have a very good friend, a very dear friend whose son is there now. And it breaks my heart that this is what he's taken part in. He's taken part in this illegality, in this criminality, in this piracy. He's a good man. He's about one of the best men you'd ever meet. And it breaks my heart that here he is doing the same as me and my friends, my colleagues did a generation ago. There is such an insular nature, such a bubble that the military is in, Judge. Whether that is due to ignorance, whether that is due to cultural reasons, whether it's due to a mindset that says we don't make policy, we carry out policy, right? So those excuses, that apologia, again, that culture, living in that bubble. I think for most of them, there is either an acceptance that this is my job, and as long as I'm in uniform, I will carry out the lawful orders of my command, including the commander-in-chief. Others who are eager to put into practice what they've been training for. Many of them will believe or do believe that what they are doing is righteous. Look, I mean, the stat I throw out all the time, Judge, is about the Iraq War, how in March of 2006, Zogby does a poll, and it finds that 3/4 of the American Marines and soldiers in Iraq, 3 years after the invasion, 4.5 years after the 9/11 attacks, believe that they are in Iraq because Iraq was a part of the 9/11 attacks, and that they are in Iraq to prevent the United States from being attacked again as it was in 9/11. So I have no doubt that many of the men and women who are part of this 20,000 strong armada off the coast of Venezuela believe in the righteousness, either because they're in that bubble, either because they're ignorant, or maybe they want to believe this. They're eager again to put into practice what they've been training for. And so I think regardless of what the outcomes are in terms of a U.S. military intervention, a war in Venezuela, and I think the United States, from its perspective, will keep it limited. So it'll be more like a Libyan intervention than an Iraq invasion. But, certainly the tragedy and the ruination that will befall the Venezuelan people from this, that's the historical record of how these things go. Or the fact that it could spread to other parts of South America and Central America, either by design or by accident and unintended consequence. Wars are breeding grounds of unintended consequences. We all know that. Beyond that, I think for these 20,000 men and women, Americans who are part of this armada, the ruination of their souls, the ruination of who they believe they are, the moral injury that will come from taking part in such an illegal, barbaric act as a regime change war against Venezuela, let alone what we've already seen so far, whether it be the piracy of these tankers or the murder of, I think it's 109 people now on speedboats in the Pacific and the Caribbean. There's no honor in any of this. there is there is nothing upon which to rest any form of laurels in this. This is dishonorable. This is shameful. And so for those young men and women who are taking part in this war, who, we can have conversations about what degree of responsibility they have for their actions, what agency that they have as uniformed members of the American military. It's a conversation that can be had. But the reality is that a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, that shame, that regret, that guilt for taking part in something that is so clearly illegal, so fundamentally wrong, so against any form of values and ethics and morals, which I believe these young men and women pronounce about themselves, that effect, that moral injury is going to have its toll. And so I think that will be one of the consequences of a war or regime change operation, or just continued acts of piracy and murder, on the American soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guard personnel that are taking part in this.
I'm going to go back to free speech in Great Britain, and we're going to play. It's on the long side. It's about 120 seconds. One of the more dramatic defenses of Palestinian rights ever articulated on the floor of the House of Commons. And as you listen to this, the great orator, I don't know if he's still alive anymore, I don't think so, Anthony Wedgwood Benn, you tell me what would happen to him if he said this today outside the House of Commons. Chris?
I finish just by saying this. War is an easy thing to talk about. There are not many people of the generation that remember it. The right honourable gentleman served with distinction in the last war. I never killed anyone, but I wore uniform. But I was in London in the Blitz in 1940, living in the Millbank Tower where I was born. Some different ideas have come in since. And every night I went down to the shelter in Thames House. Every morning I saw Dockland burning. 500 people were killed in Westminster one night by a landmine. It was terrifying. Aren't Arabs terrified? Aren't Iraqis terrified? Don't Arab and Iraqi women weep when their children die? Doesn't bombing strengthen their determination? What fools we are to live in a generation for which war is a computer game for our children and just an interesting little Channel 4 news item. Every member of Parliament tonight who votes for the government motion will be consciously and deliberately accepting the responsibility for the deaths of innocent people if the war begins, as I fear it will. Now, that's for their decision to take. But this is a quite unique debate in my parliamentary experience, where we're asked to share responsibility for a decision we won't really be taking, with consequences for people who have no part to play in the brutality of the regime which we are dealing with. And I finish with this. On October the 24th, 1945, and the former Prime Minister from Bexley, Old Sidcup, will remember it, the United Nations Charter was passed. And the words of that charter etched into my mind and move me even as I think of them. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save future generations, succeeding generations, from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has caused untold suffering to mankind. That was the pledge of that generation to this generation, and it would be the greatest betrayal of all if we voted to abandon the Charter and take unilateral action and pretend we were doing it in the name of the international community. And I shall vote against the motion for the reasons that I've given them.
Brings tears to your eyes. I mean, that was Tony Blair's motion to join George W. Bush in one of those fruitless, useless, youthful invasions in which you participated. What do you think? I mean, my point is, if he or someone else gave that speech on a public street in Great Britain today, he'd be locked up.
There's a very real danger he would be, Judge. The British police just arrested the leaders of protests in Britain, men and women who peaceably assembled to show their disagreement, their dissent to British policies in support of Israel and its genocide. The men and women who led those movements were recently arrested by the British police. So it's quite likely that he may not have been, he wouldn't have been arrested, or he would not be arrested within the Parliament, but certainly outside he may be fair game. And there's no aspect of this where it is abiding some type of legal principle or legal precedent. This is inherently political. The idea is to conduct lawfare against the citizens of Great Britain in order to shut them up. As you said earlier, John, to put fear in them, to make it so that they have to do calculations in their head as to whether or not it's worth it, whether or not they can speak their piece, speak their beliefs without fear of some type of repercussion or consequence or punishment that would have long-lasting effects on them. You get arrested in something like this. Again, as I said, they have people in prison now for more than a year in Britain who are there because of what they have said, what they have done, how they have acted civilly in defiance of their government's policy of supporting genocide. So if you get arrested in this, the ruination, the problems it can bring to you and your family, to your loved ones, are great and serious. And the government knows this. This is why they do such things. They want to shut these people down because they are so afraid. And for us, I think the response to that is to keep speaking, to keep organizing, to keep showing up. I mean, you look at that clip we just heard of that beautiful, wonderful speech from 22 years ago. You can go out, draw a straight line from that time through the Iraq War, the escalation of the Afghan War, the wars in Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, etc., to arrive at this point now. And every time the abdication of our governments, the willingness of them to do the wrong thing continuously, to do the murderous thing continuously for their own self-interest or for the benefit of their friends or for the benefit of their allies in the weapons industry or the fossil fuel industry or in the banks. We are in this point now because of that allowance by our governments. And so it's against our governments that we have to stand.
Chris just reminded me that our mutual friend George Galloway is effectively living in exile from the United Kingdom, living abroad after being questioned, detained, and threatened at Gatwick Airport in this past summer, the summer of 2025. He has managed to take his assets out of the country before they're seized. Oh, well, it's Christmas time. Maybe there's hope, although things look pretty bad. Matt, it's a pleasure. As you may know, Judging Freedom passed the 100 million view mark this past weekend. The number is astounding to me. This is the second year in a row we did this. Thanks in no small measure to all your contributions. I hope you'll stay with us next year. And I hope that the good Lord fills your heart with joy at Christmas.
And congratulations, Judge. That's well-deserved. Yes, and happy holidays and Merry Christmas to you and yours, especially your dear mom. And then, of course, happy holidays to everyone who's watching and listening. Merry Christmas to all.
Thank you, Matt. All the best. And coming up at 3 o'clock on all of this, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, and at 4 o'clock, how better to end this day, Max Blumenthal, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.